A man stuck in space for a year got a last-second twist of fate. Most astronauts have agreed that once you leave Earth, nothing is ever the same once you return. You're a changed man or woman, for better or worse. But while this transformation was merely psychological for most space voyagers, this idea was all too real for cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev. When he set out on his journey, he thought he knew exactly what Earth would look like on his return. But after an unforeseen shift in power, he began to wonder if he'd ever make it home safely.
Before we begin, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos.
The year was 1991 when 33-year-old flight engineer Sergei Krikalev left for the Mir space station from a base in Kazakhstan. In spite of all his training, Krikalev had no way of preparing for the twist his journey was about to take. At the time, the Mir space station needed some heavy maintenance, so Krikalev, the brainy engineer, was assigned to conduct repairs and experimental spacewalks at the station. In the beginning of his trip, he wasn't alone. Cosmonaut Anatoly Artsebarsky and Britain's first astronaut, Helen Sharman, went along with Krikalev for the journey. Both of them, however, wound up leaving Krikalev before disaster struck. See, Krikalev was only supposed to be in space for 5 months, a quick jaunt more or less. But after a slew of unexpected happenings plagued Earth, his trip became complicated. While he was working on the Mir space station, the Soviet Union, his home country, collapsed and split into 15 separate states on December 26 of 1991. This, of course, spurred dramatic changes. President Mikhail Gorbachev stepped down to make room for Boris Yeltsin, the new leader of the newborn country, Russia. All of this made the status of Krikalev's mission fuzzy, as his home country, the one responsible for his journey, no longer existed. Stuck in space, Sergei Krikalev was amusingly and unhelpfully nicknamed the last citizen of the USSR, but the not-so-funny situation posed the questions: how, where, and when was Krikalev to return to Earth? These questions were complicated because the Soviets had launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, which went to the new state of Kazakhstan after the collapse of the USSR. These rockets weren't cheap. So Kazakhstan then charged Moscow ridiculously large fees to use the facility, in turn delaying Krikalev's journey home, considering the Russian economy was already deteriorating. At one point, Krikalev had the opportunity to return to Earth on the Raduga re-entry capsule, but since that would have resulted in the abandonment of Mir, Krikalev declined. He was dedicated to looking after the space station until there was an available flight engineer replacement, but that would take money. Russia desperately tried to raise money by selling trips to the space station to other governments. Austria paid $7 million for a spot, and a Japanese television station spent $12 million to send one of its reporters into the cosmos. Still, fundraising fell short. Finally, after Moscow and Kazakhstan negotiated a deal, the first Kazakh astronaut and the Austrian astronaut were launched into space via the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Krikalev was finally going to be relieved, or so he thought. Sadly, once they arrived at the station, it became clear that neither of them had the skills necessary to replace Krikalev and keep up with the demands of the Mir station. Dedicated, the cosmonaut knew this meant he couldn't leave yet. During this catastrophe, Krikalev's name was plastered all over Russian newspapers, which heavily sympathized with him. The Komsomolskaya Pravda even said that Earth started to forget about its cosmonaut. The situation was serious. With all eyes on the new country, Russia became so frantic to retrieve Krikalev from space that it even considered selling Mir to the United States. But NASA showed little interest in that offer. For Krikalev, the days were starting to add up in a major way with some pretty serious consequences. Unfortunately, boredom wasn't the only risk that came with a lonely, painfully long stay in space. Overstaying your welcome in space makes you susceptible to a boatload of risks, including muscle atrophy, radiation, a dangerously weakened immune system, and even cancer. So Krikalev was in trouble. I wondered if I had the strength to survive to complete the program, a nervous Krikalev confessed when asked about how he felt preparing for his epic space adventure. "I was not sure." Soon, his situation looked completely hopeless. Thankfully, after what must have felt like forever, Germany paid $24 million for a ticket for Krikalev's replacement, Klaus Dietrich Flade. Finally relieved of space station maintenance duty, Sergei Krikalev returned to Earth on March 25, 1992. When the victim of space slowly came out of his return capsule, 4 men had to help him stand, as Krikalev hadn't experienced gravity in approximately 10 months, just about 311 days. They draped a fur coat over the brave cosmonaut and gave him a warm bowl of broth. Krikalev's return to Earth became international news. One report even described his initial appearance on March 25th as pale as flour and sweaty like a lump of wet dough. That seems a bit harsh considering the nightmare that Krikalev endured, especially considering he wasn't done with space just yet. 2 years later, he embarked on another space mission, becoming the first Russian cosmonaut to travel on a NASA shuttle. His bravery and commitment to the final frontier must have been inspired by the fearless cosmonauts that came before him. Of course, the Soviet space program might have been hiding more than a few secrets, according to recent theories. Gagarin became a role model in the USSR after his epic journey to the stars. But that's hardly a surprise given the sheer gravity of his achievement. By making it into orbit, this 27-year-old cosmonaut helped the Soviets to gain an edge over America in the so-called space race. Please feel free to share with your friends.